Anime movies have been around for a very long time now, since the 20th century, and when we look at anime movies as of recent, their popularity has exploded ever since, which has generated a lot of box office revenue at the theatres. You have anime original movies like the ones created by Studio Ghibli, and then you have anime movies from the same franchise as the anime and manga that will be airing alongside those movies, like the Dragon Ball movies and the One Piece movies. These types of anime movies will be releasing consistently in order to further promote the anime and the manga, but I think the way anime studios have been making their movies has changed ever since the 20th century. This video will go through how anime movies have evolved and changed throughout the years, all the way to the current age of anime and manga. So starting with anime movies from the 1990s, Dragon Ball, Yu Yu Hakusho and Sailor Moon, they were some of the biggest manga series airing during this period, and they all had weekly TV anime series as well. And alongside the weekly anime series, they would also release theatrical films as well. In Dragon Ball's case, they would release movies every year since 1989, from the first Dragon Ball Z film, Dead Zone, all the way to 1995 with the Wrath of the Dragon movie. Despite these movies releasing every year whilst Dragon Ball Z was on the air, the movies were considered non-canon as these films never took place during the main timeline of the Dragon Ball Z series. They all took place in separate continuities, so you didn't need to watch these films in order to understand the full story of Dragon Ball Z. But these movies were still so popular that the movie villains would still be used in other Dragon Ball media, like the video games, even to this day. The same thing also applied to the Sailor Moon movies. Sailor Moon released 3 films from 1993 to 1995, and these films also did not fit into the main story of the Sailor Moon manga. Yu Yu Hakusho had one movie titled The Poltergeist Report, which was released in 1994, and this film also did not fit into the main timeline of the Yu Yu Hakusho anime, so you did not have to watch this film to understand the full story. All these movies from these anime series also were not written by the mangaka who created these series. It would be the animation studio and different writers that would be writing the scripts instead. With the Dragon Ball Z movies, despite Toriyama not writing these movies, he still contributed by designing the movie characters, and Toei Animation will use them as part of the film. So during the 90s, releasing movies for several anime series, which were not part of the main story, was very common, as they were made in order to promote the anime series and to generate more money as a result. When we move forward to the 2000s, anime movies were still being made as they were from the 90s. You have massive series like the Big Three and Pokemon, which each had multiple movies, but it didn't really have a massive impact on the main plot of the anime series. With the Naruto movies, they released movies once a year consistently from 2004 to 2011, but these movies were not written by Kishimoto, as he was still writing the manga during this period. Despite the movies not being part of the main story, they were still considered as part of the anime series, but they were treated as fillers in movie format. And like with fillers, you can skip the movies and you will still fully understand the main story of Naruto, because the events of the movies did not have a direct impact on the main canon story arcs. And a similar thing happened with One Piece as well, where the films did not have a massive impact on the main story. But what One Piece did differently was that they started doing retellings of previous canon story arcs in movie format. In 2007, One Piece released a movie titled The Desert Princess and the Pirates, Adventures in Alabasta, and this film was a retelling of the Alabasta arc from the One Piece manga in movie form. But the movie had to cut some content for a more condensed story due to time constraints, so characters like Ace, Tashigi and Smoker were not present in the film, despite them playing important roles in the anime and manga version. And the same thing happened with the episode of Chopper movie, which was just a retelling of the Drum Island arc from the manga. But there were a lot of major differences, to the point where this cannot be considered canon to the main story, because you have things like Luffy using his gears, and Nick and Robin being a part of the film, which contradicts the original manga version. And with the Pokemon movies, they were considered to be part of the Pokemon anime, although they did not have a huge impact on the anime storyline, as did not catch or evolve any Pokemon in these movies, so they might as well have served as fillers since you can skip them but still follow the main story. But despite them being self-contained stories, the Pokemon movies were incredibly popular, with the first movie, Mewtwo Strikes Back, being the #1 anime film in the US box office for a long time, and the movie 2000 being a financial success as well. The movies mainly focused on the legendary Pokemon from the games that would be releasing during the time these movies were being released, so it was all to promote the games and the anime series as well. So in the 2000s, the anime movies were still similar to the 90s, in that there were movies that still didn't have an impact on the main storyline of the anime. Then when we move on to the 2010s, this is where we start to see a change in how anime movies were being made. Unlike with the 90s and 2000s, where the movies served as self-contained stories that did not impact the main story, the movies in the 2010s were starting to have more of an impact on the main story of the anime series. Starting with Dragon Ball Z Battle of Gods, which released in 2013, this was the first theatrical Dragon Ball Z film since 1995. This meant that after 18 years, Toei Animation decided to revitalize the Dragon Ball franchise. But with the Battle of Gods movie, instead of it being a self-contained side story, this was the first film where the events actually take place as part of the main timeline. The film takes place 4 years after the defeat of Kid Buu, and this film introduced Beerus and Whis, who later become majorly important characters for the modern era of Dragon Ball. This was also the first film where Toriyama was deeply involved in its production and screenwriting. The film became a success at the box office as well, and revived the Dragon Ball series. And then 2 years later, the next Dragon Ball Z movie, Resurrection F, released in theaters, and like with Battle of Gods, it also took place as part of the main story of Dragon Ball, taking place 1 year after Battle of Gods. And with this film, Toriyama was even more involved in the production of this film. With Battle of Gods, he only helped with the screenplay and the character design, but with this film, Toriyama himself wrote the whole script, and he confirmed it to be a continuation of his manga. Resurrection F also became a huge success, making even more money than Battle of Gods did, and these two films would later on be readapted into the Dragon Ball Super manga and the anime as well, which was never done before for an anime film. And then moving on to Dragon Ball Super Broly, which was released in 2018 in Japan. This was yet another Dragon Ball film that takes place in the main continuity. It takes place directly after the Tournament of Power, and was even referenced in the manga as well. Toriyama decided to redesign the character Broly from the previous films, and he wrote his character differently to his Z counterpart. He also decided to adapt the content from Dragon Ball Minus, which was a manga he wrote that focused on Bartok and Gine, and the destruction of planet Vegeta. This film to this day is now currently the highest grossing Dragon Ball film ever made. So since Battle of Gods, every Dragon Ball film released in the 2010s has been considered canon, with the mangaka having a huge involvement in each project. And this also happens with the Naruto movies as well. Starting with Naruto the Last, this film released in 2014, and it's supposed to take place 2 years after the events of the 4th Great Ninja War, and they focus on Naruto and Hinata's relationship. Kishimoto was also deeply involved in this film as well, with him creating the new character designs for the main cast as adults, and he also supervised the story concept. This film is a part of the main storyline, as it directly leads into the Boruto series, with Boruto and Himawari being shown in the post-credit scene, and it focuses more on the Otsutsuki clan, so it is considered canon to the Naruto series. The Boruto movie, which released 1 year later in 2015, is a direct sequel to this film, and takes place after the original Naruto manga ended. Kishimoto was even more involved in this film's production than he was for the Naruto Last movie, by taking over the screenplay, the story, and creating the character designs for the movie as well. The film also became the highest grossing film in the Naruto franchise, and this led to the creation of the Boruto manga. Like with Battle of Gods and Resurrection F, the Boruto movie was also adapted in the Boruto manga and the anime, with some differences between them, but the main plot was still the same. But Naruto and Dragon Ball weren't the only anime to have movies that were part of the main timeline. You also had the Yu-Gi-Oh movie, Dark Side of Dimensions, and this film takes place 1 year after the event of the original manga, with the mangaka Takanashi being directly involved with this film. And with the My Hero Academia movies, they all had self-contained stories, but Horikoshi managed to tie these movie characters into the original series through cameo appearances. Horikoshi himself was also involved in the production of these films, where he even added in All Might's backstory in the first movie, because he couldn't find an opportunity to put it in his manga. So although the My Hero movies didn't really have an impact on the main plot, they are still considered canon. So in the 2010s, anime movies have started to become a part of the main continuity of their anime counterparts, with the mangakas being more involved with these movies than ever before, and performing a lot better at the box office as well because of this. However, you still had some anime movies released that were not part of the main continuity, like the One Piece movies for example, and the Seven Deadly Sins movie which released in 2018. However, that film actually underperformed at the box office, which led to the Seven Deadly Sins anime being dropped off from A1 Pictures to a different studio, and that led to the decline of the animation quality. So the movie's underperformance was actually partly to blame. So in terms of box office revenue, non-canon anime movies were not performing well, besides maybe the Pokemon and the One Piece movies, because they're some of the most popular anime out there. Moving on to the 2020s in the current era of anime and manga, anime movies becoming canon have started to become a lot more common. The Dragon Ball Super superhero movie, which released in 2022, takes place after the Broly movie and the Granola arc in the manga, with Toriyama being deeply involved in the project as well. Despite the film taking a different approach to its visuals, the film still did well financially and became the second highest grossing Dragon Ball film, and was even readapted into the manga with slight differences. But when we look at the new gen anime movies, however, the anime studios decided to take a different approach to making their movies. Instead of them making canon anime movies that would later on be adapted into manga form, they instead took manga arcs from the manga and turned them into films. The first example of this is the Demon Slayer Mugen Train movie, which released in 2020, and that was a film that adapted the Mugen Train arc from the manga after the ending of season 1. Instead of waiting for the next season of Demon Slayer, they decided to adapt the Mugen Train arc into a movie, but then they would later on add the movie footage as part of the first half of season 2 later on. The film was a massive success, surpassing $500 million at the box office, which was crazy for an anime film to achieve. The same thing happened 5 years later with the newest Demon Slayer movie, Infinity Castle. This film adapted the first section of the Infinity Castle arc in the manga, and is a direct sequel to season 4 of the anime. It has surpassed Mugen Train as the highest grossing Japanese film of all time, making over $650 million at the box office. and there are still 2 more movies to be released to complete the trilogy, as Studio Ufotable has decided on wrapping up the series in a movie trilogy, instead of them doing a final season for Demon Slayer. The Jujutsu Kaisen Zero movie is a movie adaptation of the Jujutsu Kaisen Zero manga, which is a prologue to the Jujutsu Kaisen original manga. It was originally intended to be part of the anime series, but Studio Mappa decided to make it into a movie instead. And the film did very well at the box office, becoming one of the highest grossing Japanese films. The Haikyuu Dumpster Battle movie is another movie where they adapted from the manga into a movie, and this film ended up making over $100 million at the box office. The newly released Chainsaw Man movie is a movie adaptation of the Rize arc from the manga, and they chose to adapt the Rize arc into a movie instead of doing a second season. So in this modern era of anime in the 2020s, studios are now focusing on adapting arcs into movies instead of making more seasons for the anime. It's even gone to the point that even new seasons for some anime would premiere in the theaters before airing on TV. Demon Slayer did this twice with the premieres of Season 3 and Season 4, where they would incorporate the first episode of the new season and the previous episode of the last season in a compilation film. Jujutsu Kaisen is also going to be making a compilation film that will consist of the ending of the Shibuya incident arc from Season 2 and the first 2 episodes of Season 3. So when looking at how anime films were being made from the 1990s compared to how they are being made today, there has been a massive change in how they choose to make their films now. From making films that had no impact on the main story and its characters, to making films that are now part of the main series that have an impact on the main story, anime films have evolved over the decades. And the reason for this change in approach is to make more money and to spend less time making these projects. Because anime films are now part of the main canon of the anime series, when you finish a season for an anime, in order to find out what happens next, you have to buy tickets to watch in the theaters. And this explains why anime movies have started making so much more money at the box office than they did before, with Demon Slayer breaking records with its movies. And also, instead of making a 12-episode season, it is faster to animate a theatrical film which will condense the arc in that film, so there will be less issues in production. Furthermore, the movies will be given a higher budget, and the studio also has the chance to hire their best animators to work on the project, which might not always be the case if they were to animate a full anime season. And that's all I have for today. Please like, subscribe, and thank you so much for watching.